Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tech SEO podcast. I'm Dan Taylor and today I am joined by Chris Lever, who is the head of technical SEO over at Bring Digital. Bring Digital are an e-commerce focused digital agency based in Manchester, UK, just over the Pennines from where I am right now, and I'm hoping he has better weather than I do. So Chris has been working in the digital marketing industry for the past 13 years. But rather than me introducing him fully, Chris, good to have you here. Please, can you just give a quick intro to yourself?
Hi, Dan, and thanks for having me. Sure. So I'm Chris, technical SEO over at Bring Digital. I've been in SEO for 12, 13 years now. Near enough all of it has been agency side. Worked with, when I started out, small to medium-sized businesses, moving along to larger businesses, some enterprise platforms. So I've got plenty of experience within the industry.
No, it's great to have you along and thank you for making time to come on. I know, weirdly, before we did the pre-call for this podcast, even this podcast now, I think we've engaged a lot over Slack groups and LinkedIn and various digital forms, but like most of SEO, we've never met in real life and we've never actually spoken until the past couple of weeks, but probably known each other 5-6+ years.
Yeah.
Which is the standard SEO relationship, I kind of guess. So today, we're kind of here to just mainly talk about, I think, how we phrased it, technical SEO and even general SEO information overload, and how kind of noisy and saturated content in all formats is at the moment. So I kind of guess you're going to hand over the floor to yourself, Chris, just kind of introduce this, because I know this is a topic you're quite passionate about right now.
Yes, of course. Well, like most SEOs, you're on social media quite a lot. Platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, and there is a mountain of information being shared every day. And it's hard to decipher, like, which are the good articles, if there's any value in these articles. Because you can quite easily spend, an hour of your working day, just reading through articles, and that adds up. But is it adding value to, your job, your experience? So, yeah, I wanted to, let's delve into that and chat around. For me, I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot, and I do see a lot of content being shared on that. And there's a lot of great content being shared on LinkedIn. But it's do I want to read it? It's quite a long article. There's videos. Do I want to watch the video? Do I want to click through to the link, the article? And often I generally do. And then sometimes I'll consume that content and think, actually, is it any good? Is it going to add any value? And, like a lot of content that's being shared out there, it's people wanting to share their experiences, wanting to share their knowledge. And that's great. That is absolutely great. I suppose it boils down to, are you getting any value out of it? And I'm not sure what your thoughts are around that, Dan, but like I say, there's just so much content being shared out there. It's just hard to keep on top of it. And that's just the social media sites.
No, 100%. I think over the past couple of years, and potentially correlatively accelerated with the increased accessibility of LLMs for generative content production, the disconnect between some content being published and the reasons as to why it's being published versus the reasons why somebody may want to consume that content, that gap is widening. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I haven't really, I've not really used Twitter/X much since last April when they took away my blue tick and then asked me for money for it. I kind of lost interest at that point. But there's just this, for me, there's the gap now of, here's this ultimate guide to X. Here's how to do X, Y, Z. And it's like, we're kind of hitting a content for content's sake element with a lot of it. And it's almost like we need to normalize not overly trying to promote the kind of BAU, here's some content we made for a website to rank, or here's a piece of content we made for a blog post to fill a gap because a competitor has, normalized not oversharing that much and over indexing that on certain platforms versus the here's something we've done which is unique and will actually add value for you to read. And I think it's that disconnect of, it's almost kind of like with a lot, in my opinion, a lot of the industry is falling into the trap of more noise equals better and not better equals better.
Yeah, completely agree on that front. Like, for example, a lot of, say, companies and agencies do hire people to post content on social media, and I'm not sure how they're judged. Like, are they judged on engagement? Are they judged on how many posts they are sharing, how many articles they're sharing? So it is a little bit of an odd one to try and to get to the bottom of. But for me, one of the ones that I see quite a lot is taking a spin a little. Is, let's say there's an update, a Google algorithm update, and then you get spammed off it for about 24 hours. Virtually everyone's sharing the article and putting their spin on it. Some of them are great. They're really in detail and in depth. And then some of them, they're just basically copying and pasting what, say, Google have posted. So that is an odd one to get around, like, to think about.
I mean, I am personally guilty of that. And part of my thought process around doing that, and so, okay, so I have a reluctance to do it, but when I do it, I try to add some sort of unique take or unique value to it, or try to link it to something else. I think algorithm updates is a good example. I think, and we've had another couple of really prominent examples of it in the past couple of years, that being the Yandex algorithm or document leak, and then the Google leak earlier this year. And even to a point now, there's like a 325 page PDF, which I think has just been leaked today, which has come out of the Google antitrust DOJ trial, which effectively, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I used AI to summarize it. It's effectively a 325 page PDF talking about how they was going to grow the display product. The burning line is big corporation wanted to use data in a manner to increase revenue and retain revenue. It's like you could replace Google in that sentence with any other major corporation that has been or will ever exist. I kind of think we have that. There's almost an element of, if we're not posting about something, why aren't we posting about it? And he's trying to get that mental availability in that share. But I do think there's sometimes also that kind of ethical side of, even like things like, I know the Yandex leak I covered quite intensively, having done a lot with Yandex and Russian search, but it's how that messaging portrays around it, because a lot of that document was deprecated, and it kind of was a lot, oh yeah, that confirms some of our thoughts, but others kind of blew it out to be something more than it was. And I think that information distilling and dissemination process then just creates this massive amount of noise, which, to one of your points earlier, kind of has that, well, it's not so much I'm clicking on an article and reading it and then kind of going halfway through after, like, I'm not getting value from this. It's the fact that you clicked on that article because that was presented to you by the social media algorithm or by however it was presented, and it's creating so much noise, you're not actually potentially finding the useful articles and the genuine stuff coming out there, because those publishers aren't playing the algorithm game and posting frequently enough and getting that momentum to be rewarded with that visibility.
That's interesting. So LinkedIn, for example, I sometimes do forget about the algorithm and what I'm clicking on, and that's influencing what I'm seeing. When, if you think about it, Google search does exactly the same sort of process. No, well, on the topic of, say, like algorithm updates, or if there's a big story and people sharing about it. I think the people that you engage with most tend to they are more prominent in your feed, and you're more likely to engage with them again. And I think that's a little bit of a trap as well, because you are seeing the same content from the same people over and over. And then it could, squeeze out some of the better content. And the content I like to see on LinkedIn is people talking about how they approach, say, a technical issue, whether it be via a script or they use tools. I see loads of great posts being like Screaming Frog tutorials. And I think they're of value. They're of evergreen value, because there's going to be people that are picking up and new skills and learning off them all the time. So they're really good to see. And to be fair, sometimes I think, as an SEOs, we consume so much knowledge. It's handy to re-look at those posts and those videos and go, I forgot that process or that approach. I'm glad I saw that. And then you can maybe bookmark that post, or if there's a link in there, you'll go follow it, and then you share it with your wider team. So, that's good to see as well.
Yeah, I mean, but there's an interesting concept that one of my colleagues, Thierry in Gutagore, who many people in the SEO industry will know, introduced me to about a year ago. And this is this concept of having a second brain, and that as humans, we're not designed to retain information, we're designed to process information. So about a year ago, I started a Notion wiki, and basically anything which I was finding value of, I put into Notion, and I make sure. I make sure I could be better at tagging it for later retrieval, but I'm scheduling time to reprocess that. But so the information's there. So all I have to do is be able to remember there is something there and partial of it, and then I can go back and get the exact information out. This wouldn't be an SEO kind of podcast at the moment without mentioning AI. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on one of the beta SGE, when it was still called Search Engine Experience Solutions, which Google's touting. And that was the ability to open up that side panel on your browser and get an AI generated summary of the articles. For me, that looked like a really high value thing, but it's interesting that hasn't kind of come to light. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
I've seen tools like that. I've seen extensions, plugins. I suppose there could be bias involved. Let's say if you wanted to summarize a large article, if you're regularly interacting with that AI, it's going to learn some of your patterns. And if you're asking it to digest a long piece of content, such as a tutorial, etc., you might not get the best parts out of it. So tools like that, I think, are great, and it probably will stay in beta mode. But summarizing, say, tutorials is probably not great, but summarizing long articles, if you just want to get the nuggets out of that, I think that's a good use of those tools.
Yeah, and I think it very much depends on the format you're trying to process in that sense. But my look at that essentially as a tool, kind of. So I talk about this concept, time to result, quite heavily, and a lot of people think when I say that I mean like page speed and stuff like that. But the example I go to is 4 years ago, maybe something like that. I was, I think it was during one of the lockdowns. I was bored and I wanted to watch the Champions League. So I Googled literally what channel is Arsenal v Mulder on, because I wanted to watch football. The article that ranked first was a British newspaper. The title tag and the H1 were exactly the query I typed in. Yet the actual answer to my question was, I think it was something like 1900 pixels down in the article. There was 380 words of text in 4 paragraphs before the section giving me the answer, 7 adverts, and I had to do that little trick where you have to accept a certain cookie refresh, and it refreshes the URL with a parameter in it, so you're kind of getting double impression. And I'm like, time to result when you click on this, the value proposition is so low. So being able to summarize key points, particularly around the query, I can see as being useful for Google to try and understand that. And I also understand the side of publishers doing it because they want to maximize ad impressions. There's what in my opinion is the loose understanding around how dwell time works and things like that. Because there's users engaging with a site and then there's users literally being held hostage on a site. They're two different things in my opinion. And you can't measure them both in the same way. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to know, to hear your thoughts on that kind of summarization thing. So I'm going
to that's interesting. Well, you mentioned, say, publishers that for them to earn a living, they are putting ads across the pages. They're making the pages more long form, so you've got to scroll down so to get all those ad impressions. But if we start to use AI tools more to summarize, then we're going to lose more publishers. The revenues are going to drop. So what's next after that? So AI has its uses, but I'm already thinking those publishers are going to have a tough time trying to generate an income.
I think it's for public. I mean, this is going on to a slightly segue, but for me, publishers is probably one of the most, I'm going to say, time hit categories that has ever existed, because 100+ years ago, information traveled by telegram. It traveled by post. It was a slow information process. Like, and something would happen in, I'm going to use America as an example here. Something happened in New York, and there'd be some sort of telegram or more system to distribute it out there, and it became like a dissemination process which was much slower. Now something happens and the world knows about it in seconds because of Twitter and all the other networks. Then when content was kind of being an element, it was the newspapers, it was daily, it was weekly, it was monthly, it was a cadence to when you receive news. People would listen to, but as my granddad used to call it, the wireless. They'd listen to the radio for scheduled updates. And then the digital age came along, and publishers were no longer an offline industry. They started to move online because users have now matured and internet penetration has increased, computer penetration, internet literacy, computer literacy of all the generations, smartphones, etc. They're now having to kind of evolve again, but the advent of the internet evolved their business model. Now we're kind of at a level of internet maturity, which is going to further impact and evolve their business model. And it's how they adapt to that. And I think there are going to be some publishers who do unfortunately struggle with this. I have to readdress their operations and move in certain ways. But then there are going to be some publishers who understand, who are better equipped for the ecosystem due to the kind of content they put out. Like, right now, if I'm looking for sports news, I go to the BBC Sport app. If I'm looking for general news, it's the BBC app. But similarly, like, if I want to look at business stuff, it's Financial Times and Economist. Like, there are brands within the publishing space who have gained that reputation to draw those users in. And I think it's the publishers who are going to struggle most are those who don't have that USP or that standpoint or that position that differentiates themselves enough from everybody else in that pool. And a good example of this is like your regional kind of press things where you'll get syndicated content across every single website, and you'll have, I don't know, using my example, I grew up in Grimsby, you'll have the Grimsby Telegraph publishing a story of something local in Huddersfield because it's syndicated across their network. And it's like that, change the model, focus on the quality, and try to gain that way. And as users are becoming more, I mean, especially privacy centric and using things like Brave, plastering the page with ads, changing that experience up, that model might suffer anyway from that user base.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
So kind of moving on from that kind of talk about information overload, what excites you about SEO right now? What are you excited for or excited for right now?
I wouldn't say SEO in general. I would say AI and the tools that AI allows you to build. So, for example, Python scripts that help you crawl a website in a different way than a standard tool. And, you've got ChatGPT that can help you do that. Or like you're on say a JS heavy site. There's a lot of JS going on in the background. You can paste some of those snippets into ChatGPT, and it'll just tell you exactly what they are. And if there's an issue, it helps you to formulate the tickets.
Mhm.
And I think that has really, really helped myself, our team, and I think the wider tech SEO community. And there's a lot more coming from the AI. So the AI and the AI tools really got me excited at the moment.
Do you ever think AI would ever be able to fully replace a tech SEO individual?
Yes. Yes. And there's various reasons, because tech SEO, you've got your junior tech SEOs, your mid-exec tech SEOs, your more senior tech SEOs. It's just going to work its way up the ladder. Like, for example, say content teams, you could have AI to write dozens of articles and you just need to proof them. It could be the same. So you have AI assistants like who are doing technical SEO jobs, and you've got the overseer who's moderating and managing those tasks. And I think with that, it can really help agencies grow, because they'll be able to manage larger workflows and they'll be able to keep costs down. So yes, I do think that at some point tech SEO can be done by AI as a role.
Interesting. No, I kind of guess I'm not going to say I have a similar viewpoint, but I agree in the sense that it will become an enabler and it will enable the agency model and even in-house models become more efficient in certain things. I think what we need to potentially do as an industry is like you said, like at the moment, tasks which were done 5 years ago by a slightly more junior technical SEO could now, to an extent, be 95% replicated by AI and done that way. The issue I see, and not just with AI, but all tools, is, let's be fair, the barrier to entry to be an SEO is extremely low. You need a laptop and internet connection and probably one tool subscription, and you can hit 60% of the nails on the head straight off the bat. What I've seen happen with that, and what I've seen happen with the early days of AI tooling around this, is you'll have a junior exec come into an agency, and it'll be their first role in SEO, and they're kind of taught, oh, you use this tool to do this. They're not actually taught why they're doing it. So I kind of see AI being that kind of enabler to help get a junior exec to more like a mid exec quicker, in the sense of you don't have to spend X amount of time doing the mundane, repetitive jobs because the AI can take over it. Instead, you can work more on that theory side, understanding that, yes, resolving the JavaScript issues will help with indexability. Why do we want it to help with indexability to do X, Y, Z? And ultimately tie that then back up to those wider business goals and then those wider communication elements that make it matter to not just the main point of contact with the client, but also then the other stakeholders and even people who sign the checks and pay the invoices in the clients as well. And I see that being help. I just think our risk is that we get stuck in that quagmire of saying that we can do a technical SEO audit because we can hit enter after pasting the URL into a tool search bar and then going through a color-coded report almost.
Yeah, I can understand your point of view on that front. My worry is, though, where you mentioned of accelerating the growth from, say, junior to a midway, is once that becomes widely accepted, it kind of pulls up the drawbridge for junior SEOs to enter, the work stream, the industry. So
That's
a
what
little,
we need to be careful of,
yeah,
because if we don't, there needs to be that entry point still. So we potentially, as an industry, need to redefine that entry point, because we just end up with a aging population in the industry without the rest of the talent coming through, which makes handover harder, which makes expansion harder. And ultimately, we kind of enter almost like a regression period and rebounds round. One thing I will clear up, when I say acceleration, one of my biggest bugbears in SEO is there's a huge difference between, like, someone can have 3 years experience, but they won't have 3 years of experience. And it's making sure that the tooling with the AI, with the additional stuff, that even though we're trying to accelerate that growth curve from junior to mid to better understanding, is still trying to give them that level of experience that they can actually build on it, and not just days, hours, time spent, if that makes sense.
yeah, completely makes sense.
Completely.
And the point on experience as well, I suppose it depends as well. If you're in-house with a brand, your day-to-day tasks are probably going to be very similar throughout that 3 years. Whereas within an agency, you've got new clients being onboarded quite frequently. You're met with different challenges. So yeah, it's an interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, even to that point, it depends on the kind of agency. If your agency purely works with Shopify clients and targets a certain region or certain, like, type of business sector, you're going to be quite narrow in that experience. But there's nothing wrong with those agents. It's just that expansiveness and being able to reduce the mundanity and repetitiveness of some of those tasks can potentially help broaden my experience level and give you the time and mental capacity to do additional things. So kind of just moving on from that and kind of staying on that kind of AI theme, the kind of final question I've got, and this is just because it's kind of come out in the last couple of weeks, and it's a big hot topic in the industry at the moment. Do you actually think Search GPT will ever actually be launched as a search engine by OpenAI? And then, kind of depending on the answer to that, if it is launched, do you actually ever think it'll ever really rival? I mean, I say Google's dominance, but at this moment in time, I'd probably even say Bing's market share.
I think my answer would be, I hope so, but I don't think it will. I think once, like you mentioned, there's been quite a lot of chat around Search GTP recently, and I believe if people have got better beta access accounts, so they've been testing it. But I think people are so ingrained with using Google now. There's all the ecosphere of Google, such as Maps, tools, Gmail, that they're going to keep you coming back to using their product. I think Search GTP maybe might find a way onto, say, mobile devices such as a smartwatch or your mobile phone, and maybe it'd be more voice powered overall. But I don't think it's going to break into, maybe, say, your traditional, like, mobile search and your mobile desktop. That's my theory, and I think Ahrefs attempted to launch a new search engine. What was it, 12 months ago? It did have a bit of a fanfare on launch, but I don't see anyone talking about using it anymore, or even using it at all.
Do you think any of this could potentially change? So this is now speculative, but obviously Google's just lost the lawsuit with the DOJ in the US for being monopolistic. If we look at other lawsuits Google have lost globally, in 2021, Yandex successfully led a suit against them in Russia for monopolistic behavior. And one of the remedies from that, which was put forward by the Roskomnadzor, which is the federal anti-monopoly service over there, was that they had to make a active prompt widget on all Android devices. And just for listening kind of benefit here, Android has got a ridiculously high market penetration in the Russian market versus Apple, where all users basically were met with a screen of, would you like to choose your default search engine? And it listed like Google, Yandex, DuckDuckGo, Bing, probably 2-3 others in there, etc. The market share when that was released was about a 50-50 split in Russia. Over the past kind of 2-3 years, and obviously other factors have influenced this as well over the past 2-3 years, but now it's more like a 65-35 in favor of Yandex. If a similar remedy is put forward in the US by the DOJ, and say, I don't know, October 1st, everyone will wake up to a prompt they can't ignore, and it is please choose your default search engine on this device. And it is here's 7 search engines, the name of a search engine, and then some vetted text. So it's not like one of those SAS articles, which is like, I don't know, the 10 best search engines published by the search engine in first with War and Peace written about it, and then the tidbit entries for the other 9 with no CTAs or links, etc. Is that a market grab then for the likes of Bing, DuckDuckGo, I mean, Search GPT, even if it's not even out at the time? Brave. I always forget what Hrefs was called. Was it Yep? Was it Yep?
I think it was Yep, yeah.
It was either Yep, Hey, or You. I know it was a 3-letter word.
It was Yep, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that will probably happen, where they will make that the pop-up where you can choose the search engine or choose the default search engine. But I think, Google's got all those smart minds. They will try and wrestle them back. So you may have another pop-up down the line. How is such a search engine performing for you? Would you like to come back to Google? I think that will probably happen because that's not I can't even get the word out.
Anti-monopolistic.
Exactly, yes. And if you think about it, it happened with Microsoft many years ago with the Internet Explorer browser. It was like the default browser. They was forced to give users a selection. But for them, it was the downfall of that browser. I think it quickly lost momentum because you had the likes of Firefox and then Google Chrome, and then Google Chrome dominates it. Give you, for example, another thing, like on Microsoft still, if you do like a clean install of, say, Windows, when you're setting up your browsers, you've got Edge. One of the first things you probably do is download Google and then Edge is trying to stop you from doing that. It's saying we've updated X amount of features. We've got AI Copilot, but you still go ahead and do that anyway. So I think that type of behavior would translate onto, once you get a pop-up, you probably say, okay, I'll give this browser a try. And I think maybe within a month you'd be back to Google because you just got so used to using Google's results. And I'm talking from a tech savvy sort of perspective here. I can't speak for the wider general populations.
No, 100%. And yeah, I mean, just to clarify, because I've just tested it, you don't actually need the clean install either. You can literally just go to Bing.com and type in download Chrome, and you get the big promoted by Microsoft, try the latest browser from Microsoft, and it's like launch now and keep you on edge kind of thing. It's but interestingly, the next ad, which is visually appealing, is from Opera, which is quite curious. Like, it's literally like, even if you don't want us, do not choose Chrome kind of thing. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the market adopts. I kind of think the privacy browsers or focus browsers might have slightly more of an edge because the media likes to scaremonger when it comes to your personal data online. And I personally think there's a gap in the general public between actually understanding what your personal data actually is and when they say your personal data has been leaked, what has actually been leaked. Because I think anyone who's been using the internet for at least 5 years is at least on lists. Like, they're on lists, they're going to get spammed, they're going to get told that, I know, you can have $1 million if you send me 100,000 now to do a transfer fee kind of thing. Like, it's been going on for years, but the media's got more scaremonger focused on it. So I think like Brave, DuckDuckGo, etc. might have. It depends on how that remedy's rolled out, because if they do say October 1st, you're going to have this option, I can see it almost becoming like an election campaign level out of home, and like how Ask Jeeves used to be in the early 2000s. they were smashing television adverts and commercials back in the early 2000s. And they still lost out to Google, but I can see that kind of search engine wars again. But I do agree to your point that I think people are creatures of habits, and because it's data, because it's not something tangible that most people can grasp, is Google doing a bad thing to you? How do you make that back? I think the other search engines have to make and invert the weaknesses of Google to actually stand a chance of taking away that share.
Yeah. Well, Google are a business at the end of the day, and they make money from data. That data is data they collected from you. But in exchange, they give you a wide range of tools. For, again, Google Docs, Gmail, all those free tools. They cost money to develop and maintain. And at that cost, if they're collecting data off me to serve ads, I'm quite happy with that approach.
Yeah, and I think data is important to understand how big data is as a currency out there at the moment. In a non-search engine kind of context, Spotify, the streaming platform, have done a huge sponsorship deal with FC Barcelona. To a point, it's shirt sponsorship, it's renaming the stadium, lots of assets kind of in there. And I think there was something, I can't find the exact figures now, but there was one piece of data which I remember coming out of it, and that deal would have been worth hundreds of millions more, if not going into the billions more, if Barcelona, because they boast some 1 million fans globally, but the number of fans whose data they had with opt-in consent to receive marketing permissions from direct or third parties was such a small proportion, it just made the rest of the data useless, had no value to it. So that kind of killed it off. I mean, even the display document was been released from, leaked from a DOJ antitrust trial today. It's all data. It's talking about data for personalization, data for previous trends, current historic locations. But it's how the internet's been built, essentially. It's how 90% of digital industries have been built. It's only now we're starting to get that legislation in place. Do you have any other thoughts just on Search GPT before we wrap up? Are you excited? I mean, I know you said you hope it's launched. Why do you hope when it comes to life?
I like new tools, and I would like to see how it presents the data, where it's collecting that data from. I'm a little bit dubious if it's going to be real-time data. I look at crawl logs, and I'm not seeing much in the way of hits coming from OpenAI or any of their bots. So I do hope it comes. I think the data, when it comes, will be quite limited, and it will probably grow. Yeah.
No, well, thank you very much for spending time. I know when we sat down to do this, I said, 15, 20 minutes is usually good, and we've doubled that. So you pretty much could say this is like most SEO rants on Twitter and LinkedIn. It started off with good intentions and is now a 1,000 tweet or comment thread. And no one can actually remember why it started, but it has. But so that's all for this episode. Thank you again to Chris for joining me and taking time out today. Thank you very much for coming. And thank you all for listening, whether or not you're at home, in the office, in the car, in the gym, or just in front of a laptop screaming into a spreadsheet because Excel has crashed or the formula's not working. So if you like the Tech SEO podcast, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow the audio version of this on your podcast app, whether it be Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. And I've been Dan Taylor, and this has been the Tech SEO podcast. Thank you very much for listening.